Hunter x Hunter combines the adventure of exploring unknown lands with tactical thinking. Many of the challenges Gon and his friends face require them to consider their options and think outside the box before making their move. In the first season of Hunter x Hunter, Gon participates in the Hunter exam, hoping to discover why his father left him to pursue this type of career. As he progresses, he encounters many different obstacles as well as other dangerous competitors, yet still doesn't miss out on the chance to forge strong relationships along the way. The main focus of the season, apart from introducing our characters, is to teach the audience what it takes to be a hunter, including the variety of skills one can have to be successful. Hunters are incredibly talented individuals, but there aren't any specific requirements needed for them to achieve their goals. The title itself is more like a license to work in a particular field, and there are multiple pathways one could take once it's been obtained. They also aren't as restricted when it comes to common rules. For instance, murder doesn't receive as harsh a punishment, and they're allowed into most countries and facilities, providing them more freedom to achieve their dreams. By the end of the season, Gon and most of his friends have become hunters, and from there the show goes from strength to strength, as the license opens up the world's possibilities for him to explore. Now at this point, I do have to pull the rug out from under you, as part of the reason Hunter x Hunter gets better after season 1 is some of the earlier episodes are pretty inconsistent. There's still some high quality ones, but they're mixed in with some that are not so great. One of the best representations of this is Trick Tower. Trick Tower is the third phase of the Hunter exam, spanning from episodes 8 to 12. In it, the contestants travel from the top of the tower facing a variety of challenges on their way to reaching the goal, getting to the base within 72 hours. Gon and his team find themselves caught up in a majority rules test. It's as self-explanatory as it sounds. Every decision is made via voting, and the majority decides the course of action the group will take. I'm going to go through these episodes in detail and look at why there are some issues as well as plenty of praises. So let's begin the breakdown. The episode starts with the Hunter airship taking the remaining contestants to a giant cylinder located on another giant cylinder. Just go with it. After landing on top, Beans gives them their task, then leaves the contestants to fend for themselves. The show quickly gets to work answering some of the questions the audience is likely to have. Gon's group considers scaling down the face of the tower, but at the expense of this rock climber discover that that's not really an option. Some time passes and Kurapika notices there are fewer contestants at the top of the tower than there were at the start of the challenge. Gon and Killua make a similar discovery and see how it works. There are hidden doors all over the tower, and they're the key to entering inside. In this, it's also explained that each contestant must find their own door. They can't just follow someone else's trail. Being unable to climb down the tower nor follow another contestant's pathway are deliberately shown to us. Hunters have quality sensory abilities and should be able to find the hidden doors without spending too much time on it. Both moments increase the standards expected of hunters, an element of this season not always achieved successfully. In episode 6, the credibility of hunters takes a huge hit, not because of the challenge but through the contestants' performance, as they arrogantly fumble their way through the task. The arrogance part is especially frustrating when you consider that up to the start of the second phase, almost every step of the exam had an unexpected element, designed to make the test more difficult than originally thought. For the record, I hate episode 6, and found episode 7 to be a massive improvement, so it's quite satisfying to see these moments follow the trends set by 7, rather than the awful one left by 6.
美食ハンターだろうと、ハンターを名乗るには大きな覚悟が必要だと思い知らされた受験者たち。
After a quick discussion, the four of them pick their paths and say their goodbyes, fully expecting they'll be separated once the tiles are flipped. But surprisingly, they all end up in the same room. This whole moment plays out as a bit of a joke, but it works because it doesn't take away from the scene. It doesn't contradict any previous information. Their separation was implied but never guaranteed, and sticking together doesn't make the challenge any easier. In fact, traveling as a group could potentially be more difficult than going solo. Jokes have the ability to remove some of the impact from the current event. We'll actually look at a great example of this in the future. Once gathering themselves, they notice a table with 5 watches on it. Each watch has an X and O button as well as the time remaining in the challenge. The 4 of them put on their watches, but they'll have to wait for a 5th person to find the trapdoor before proceeding. The warden talks to them through a speaker, laying out the requirements of the challenge.
お前たちが選んだのは多数決の道。クリアのためには互いの協力が必要絶対条件となる。
2 hours pass until a fifth person finally arrives, and that person is Tompen. For those of you who don't know or have forgotten, Tompen is known as the Rookie Crusher. He's taken the exam over 30 times with no intention of passing. All he tries to do is derail the rookie's chances of being successful, and with Gon, Kurapika, Killua, and Leorio all fitting into this category, he isn't the most ideal person they would want as their fifth member. He's already attempted to end their chances a few times. During the first phase, he tried to trick them with spiked drink, and on the airship, he tried to convince Kurapika and Leorio the ship's journey was part of the test to play on their paranoia. But if nothing else, at least they can begin the challenge. The wall opens up, revealing a door, giving them their first majority rules question. And as Leorio points out, the answer should be obvious. The question is, do you want to open the door? However, the result comes back as 4 yes, 1 no. And Tompen claims he accidentally pressed the wrong button. Our team's reactions are as follows. Leorio loses it with him, Gon points out the door opened anyway, Kurapika knows they don't have time to bicker, and Killua mentions it doesn't matter as long as they all keep pressing the correct option. For Tompen, intentionally picking the wrong option has some risk attached to it, but it pays off big time. If they discover who chose incorrectly, it will plant a target on his back, increasing suspicion towards him. The benefit, however, is he discovers who's the weakest link. Gon, Kurapika, and Killua handled what he did calmly and were able to look at the facts. Leorio didn't. He easily lost his cool, signaling to Tompen that he is the one to target. The group continues until reaching another majority rules question. This time it's left or right. Both corridors look the same and right wins 3-2. Gon and Leorio picked left, but as Tompen points out, most people naturally pick left when presented with this type of problem. So to counter the examiners, the three of them chose to go right. Tompen's very smug about what happened, trying to provoke a reaction from Leorio. He's in a position where should Leorio engage with him, he holds all the cards. He knew about the fact and chose the right answer. Leorio, on the other hand, was wrong, so he has no way of responding to this successfully. After walking down the right path, Gon's team arrives in an arena with 5 prisoners on the other side. The warden explains the challenge. The Hunter Exam Committee hired these prisoners as examiners. Our team will participate in 5 one-on-one challenges. You can fight in any way you like and there won't be any draws. A winner is declared when your opponent admits defeat. Each fight will have an extra element added to them. For every hour the prisoners delay our team, a year will be taken off their sentences. So they're also battling against time. It's at this moment some of the issues with Trick Tower reveal themselves. By adding time as a factor, majority rules has been hurt as it's no longer the only deciding component. Gon's team could still lose even if they have more points. If they were to win the first 2 games but the third person uses up all the time, they would fail whilst leading on the scoreboard 2-1. The time factor makes it so the challenge isn't majority rules. Having said that, it's not over by any stretch, as they'll have chances to avoid such an outcome, and one of those is choosing the order in which they'll compete. Now, without knowing what the challenge will be going in, the order they choose could be the difference between success and failure. Kurapika understands this and is about to volunteer, but Tompen stops him, opting to be the guinea pig in his place. His argument is they don't want him to be the last competitor if the score is tied 2-2. The group agrees, and so Tompen is the first one up. This is a terrible decision. With time being added in as a factor, you can't let Tompen compete. He could throw the game immediately. He could waste all the time now before anyone else gets a chance to participate. They're lucky to get away with this. Tompen could have tried to negotiate with his opponent by revealing his true intentions. There's enough time to try before Beldot attacks, and he's about to reveal his plans anyway, so he might as well try and waste as much of the 72 hours as he can. But let's play out this mock scenario in a little more detail. As Beldot sets the nature of the contest, Tompen can inform him of what he's actually here to do. If Beldot believes him and agrees, then all good, Tompen gets what he wants. If he doesn't, Tompen still has leverage. He can inform Beldot that if he tries to attack him, he will resign immediately. And although his team will get the point, no time will be lost. Beldot's not stupid, he's aware of both parties' goals and is smart enough to recognize that doing nothing will be to his benefit, leaving Tompen free to run down the clock and waste the remaining 70 hours, confirming the prisoner's win and the failure of all 4 rookies. Now there could still be a way for our team to get out of this if the situation took this turn. Killua could threaten Tonpin's life, so he'd have to consider whether failing the rookies is worth dying for, which I don't think he would be willing to do. But either way, you would end up hurting the later scene between Killua and Jonas. We know what Killua can do, we've seen it. So a lot of the impact from that moment comes from the characters being completely caught off guard when he shows that side of his nature. One scene will be hurt in order to repair the damage to another. Whether you like or hate my mock scenario, the main point of it is that by adding time as a factor, the show has ran itself into a corner. There was a need to make sure Tonpin competes so we see all 5 games. So to compensate for this, he didn't put pressure on the issue of time. The subject was avoided by having him deliberately not address some important cards at his disposal. Whether Gon's team wins or loses, Tonpin ignoring time is a problem. Hunter x Hunter doesn't do well when it approaches situations in this manner. It performs much better when all the characters' cards are considered, and their decisions are made after weighing up the options available to them. But if Tonpin isn't allowed to compete, who should be chosen instead? Well, without any knowledge of what the challenges will be and with the guinea pig aspect at play, the best choice at this stage is Leorio. He has the trust of the group and will be able to uncover the type of challenges they're likely to face. He's also the weakest competitor, although he himself is unaware of this fact, so it might be hard to convince him to go first. However, before Tonpin volunteered, Kurapika was about to accept, so did the team dodge a bullet by having Tonpin face Beldot rather than Kurapika? Would Kurapika have been able to beat Beldot? Well, as far as I can tell, I don't know. I don't think there's enough information to be definitive either way. They're both quite capable, though both are intimidated by Killua's strength. The main problem is Beldot doesn't get a chance to show us what he can do. It may come down to the fact he didn't ban weapons when he set the challenge, or if there's any references to spiders. What actually happens is Tonpin faces Beldot, who straight away proposes a deathmatch. Tonpin accepts, but as soon as the challenge begins, he resigns, much to the disbelief of the group and the frustration of Leorio, who calls him out on his actions. Tonpin confirms Leorio's suspicions. He's here to ruin the chances of any first-timers who try to complete the exam. Killua tells the group the series of events worked in their favor, as he knew exactly what the mercenary was planning on doing. Tonpin's choice to reveal all these cards is a poor one. He could still have tried to conceal what he was planning just in case new information came up. Killua gave him the perfect excuse as to why what he did was best for the team. But now he can't use it. It's too late to backpedal on his statements. I'm far from saying it would have worked, but a 1% chance is better than 0, and he willingly chose 0. But him quitting has left the team in trouble, down 1-0 and in need of a win. Gon volunteers himself for the second game and faces Sedekin, a serial bomber serving a 149-year sentence. Sedekin opens things up by telling Gon he isn't very strong. Gon, on the other hand, is the opposite, so Sedekin suggests a game not involving either physical or mental ability. He pulls out 2 candles, hiding the length of them with his hands. The game itself is rather simple. They both pick a candle and whoever's candle goes out first is the loser. Gon agrees, so Sedekin reveals the true length of each candle. Turns out one is much longer than the other. He declares Gon's team must use majority rules to determine which candle they wish to choose. Kurapika starts to break down their options, including the psychological impact of getting this wrong compared to an even 50-50. For the record, he says it's greater. And he's right. The general reason for this is your mind convinces itself there's more information available than actually presented. It gives off the impression there's enough at play to figure out the correct answer, when in reality there isn't, and it's still a completely even choice. In the meantime, Sedekin's sitting down in the arena with the 2 candles behind him. Kurapika follows the thought process I just mentioned and bounces the choice back to Gon. There's no way of telling which candle has been rigged, so he backs Gon's instincts rather than overthinking their options. Even though Gon's response is super simple, it's completely fine, as Kurapika's right. No amount of thinking will get them any closer to the correct outcome. They don't have enough information to figure out the answer and no way of obtaining more clues. So Gon takes the long candle and now we wait. The wind coming up the side of the arena provides an extra level of danger, so we must be careful. Sedekin unveils part of the trick to this test by admitting Gon's candle has already been tampered with. Gon's candle bursts to life, burning much brighter and rapidly increasing the rate the wax is melting. Killua reckons Gon's only got about 2 to 3 minutes before his candle goes out completely, whereas Leorio believes he's onto Sedekin's trick. He must have rigged the long candle. But in truth, Sedekin's plan involved using 4 candles and rigging whichever one Gon chose. So no matter which option they picked, Gon would still be facing this dilemma. Gon then smiles at Sedekin, charges him and blows out his candle, meaning he is declared the winner. With the extra heat generated by the oil, the wind couldn't extinguish the flame when he moved. So all he had to do was blow out Sedekin's candle first. Gon is congratulated by his peers, and even the warden of the prison has some nice words to say about him.
ピンチをチャンスに変える能力といい、あの子、なかなかやるな。
There's no denying Gon certainly has talent, but Sedekin chose a really bad challenge. All of it works in his favor and suits his skills until the moment the trap is activated. Once this happens, things start to fall apart for him. Sedekin hasn't thought about what his opponent will do once backed into a corner, and this particular corner promotes someone who is physically strong. The arena is extremely open and empty, making it clear there aren't too many options available for the contestants to use. A quick scan will confirm to many there's no way of sustaining the flame of your candle, so the next natural thought most people will have is, can I blow out Sedekin's candle first? And with that, charging him is the best course of action. With his knowledge of pyrotechnics, Sedekin is the perfect person to set the trap, but the worst person to deal with the consequences. Once the trap's been sprung, he would be better off being someone like Beldot, as it would be much harder to blow out his candle than the physically weak Sedekin. So with the scores tied at 1 apiece, the next one up is Kurapika, who faces Majanti. Now Majanti sucks. He sucks. His plan is to bluff his opponent into resigning with his frightening appearance and scary performance. Now, to be fair to Majanti, he would have benefited by going before Beldot. Beldot is a mercenary and someone who backs in his own strength. He sets an example for the contestants of how someone who is actually strong behaves. He doesn't showboat or brag loudly about his abilities. He simply sets the challenge and lets his actions do the talking. He had a much calmer and more confident appeal to him than Majanti's fake performance ever does, and it hurts Majanti's chances of ever being able to pull this bluff off. However, Majanti still has issues. Plenty of issues. For starters, his voice is way too goofy, and it hampers his ability to convince his opponent. The second is he talks too much. He has too much to say. A good way of increasing the bluff's success is to keep it short and sweet. He overplays his hand, especially with the line, I mean, it's a little much. Now, Majanti's huge body is meant to add to the idea he's extremely strong. Except this is the world of Hunter x Hunter, and in Hunter x Hunter, your physical appearance has absolutely no say in how strong you are. In our world, it can at least point you in the right direction without it being an exact measure. In this world, however, your muscle mass has no say in how strong you are at all. As it is, we're currently watching 2 12-year-olds who have made it to the 3rd phase of the Hunter exam, one of which will soon display impressive abilities far beyond his older and more muscular opponents. There are also plenty of other moments in Hunter x Hunter where physical appearance doesn't tell you anything when it comes to power level. After he declares the nature of the challenge to a completely unfazed Kurapika, he bans weapons from the contest. If the bluff was still alive, which it definitely isn't, but let's pretend for a moment it's not completely dead and buried, banning weapons is a sign of weakness. He's been boasting about how dangerous and deadly he is, how much he loves violence. So by adding in the condition of no weapons, he's broken his own image. He appears to be so confident that it doesn't make sense for someone this arrogant to add in rules and regulations to benefit his own safety. He played his hand so strongly that trying to backtrack even slightly is never going to work. Not that it matters at this point, as Killua, Kurapika and Gon weren't buying the charade to begin with, and still don't even after he leaps into the air and smashes the ground with his robotic arm. By this stage, it's too late for him to show off his physical feats of strength, as the damage to his image has been done. Majanti turns around to reveal his spider tattoo, a sign of the Phantom Troop, and although it's fake, it signals the end. At the sight of it, Kurapika's tone dramatically changes. His eyes become scarlet, and before Mojanti even realizes what's happening, Kurapika grabs him by the jaw and punches him into the ground. The spider tattoo speaks volumes about Kurapika's motivation and the hatred he feels towards the Phantom Troop. He knew it was fake. He knew Mojanti posed no threat to him, and for such a calm and logical guy, there was no reason for him to react the way he did. Yet even a small reminder of something possibly related to the troop triggered a violent and visceral reaction as he became unable to control his rage. The moment not only does a lot for our understanding of the depths of Kurapika's despair, it saves the entire challenge. Kurapika was wasted on such a pathetic opponent, an opponent who was never going to test him in any way whatsoever. It would have served him much better if he had to face someone like Lorette. She could have presented him with a difficult obstacle to overcome. But if that's not the direction the show's going to head in, then there needs to be something else to bank on, and tying it into Kurapika's family history proved to be a big saving grace, as otherwise this whole thing would have been a major disappointment. Before moving on, there's a couple of neat details to look at. The first is this all happens at the end of episode 9, and despite having seemingly won the match, the scoreboard hasn't ticked over. The second is when Kurapika displays his strength, most people, including the mercenary, are surprised by his achievement, except for Killua, who remains completely unfazed. An indication his level of power is much higher than everybody else's present. They're both neat little details designed to cue us in to events still to come. By the way, why love hearts? Is it because he loves to kill? Guy sucks. Match 4 is underway between Leorio and Lorette, or it would be, except there's a problem. Lorette points out they can't start yet as Kurapika and Mojanti's match hasn't ended. It was a death match, meaning the fight isn't over until one of the contestants either surrenders or dies. And with neither condition having been met, the challenge is officially still on. Leorio is cool with this, expecting Kurapika won't have any dramas about finishing Mojanti off. But he refuses to attack someone who can't defend themselves. Kurapika's decision creates tension within the group, especially with Leorio. And things aren't made better when Killua offers to do it for him but can't due to the nature of the contest. It's a one-on-one fight, so his interference would disqualify Kurapika, losing them the point. Leorio tries to use the majority rule system to force Kurapika's hand, but it backfires. Since it's them asking the question rather than the examiners, the watches don't work, and the answer doesn't appear on the screen. He makes things worse for himself by trying to vote through a raising of hands. Tompen points out how bad of a choice it was for him to do this. All he's done is ostracize himself from the group. He used the worst methods of implementing majority rules. Both discussing before voting and the raising of hands reveals who's in the minority, whereas the timers hide this information. Tompen's confident Leorio's isolation and the suppression of his opinion will eventually lead to the group collapsing. But for now, let's look at the debate raised in this moment. Should Kurapika finish off Mojanti? To do this, we'll discuss why he's here and what he hopes to achieve. Kurapika wants to pass the exam for revenge. He intends to kill the 12 members of the Phantom Troop who massacred his clan and recover the Scarlet Eyes they stole. Becoming a hunter will grant him access to black market information and funding not normally available to the general public. So with killing 12 people on the table already, why does it matter if there's one more? Well, killing people who can't defend themselves is at the root of what causes him so much suffering. If anything, you'd absolutely expect him to be against it. Keep in mind, Mojanti's completely defenseless and murder isn't actually a part of his criminal record. He's in jail for blackmail and fraud. The other thing in favor of not killing him is the exam isn't the be-all and end-all. If he fails, there's a chance he could find them another way, or better yet, take the exam next year. He doesn't have to complete it on this attempt. Speaking of completing the exam, becoming a hunter doesn't mean you have to be a killer. That's not a piece of criteria. The hunter exam involves potentially life-threatening danger, but you don't have to kill to pass. In fact, as far as we know, only 3 of the final 9 contestants killed someone during the exam. And the final challenge has a rule that strictly forbids killing. So no, murder doesn't go hand in hand with being a hunter. So with Kurapika out of the way, let's look at the rest of the group. Tompen's pretty easy, he doesn't want to complete the exam anyway. making him more than happy to have Kurapika do nothing so we can quickly move past him. Next up is Gon. Gon is here to find his father to discover why he left him to become a hunter. He has plenty of motivation to pass the exam, but also a straightforward view of the world. He has a few rules he wouldn't break, and wouldn't want Kurapika to kill a defenseless person so he can pass the exam. It isn't something he's going to do even if passing is super important to him. Killua joined the hunter exam despite his family and for the fun of it. He heard the exam was challenging and joined, wanting to test himself and see what all the fuss was about. He comes from a family of assassins who have both high hopes and certain expectations of him. He hates the life his family forced him to be a part of and no longer wants to be a killer. So it would be super hypocritical of him to force Kurapika to kill Mojanti and be a part of something he despises. Gon also has a part to play in Killua's decision, as the longer the exam has gone on, the more Gon has piqued his interest. Gon represents a life he wants to choose for himself, so if he's not going to press the issue, then neither is Killua. The final person to look at is Leorio, the most adamant Kurapika should kill Mojanti. His motivation for taking the exam is so he has the resources available to make sure what happened to his friend in the past never happens again. With his strong reasoning for wanting to pass and not being quite as good-natured as Gon, it's not surprising Leorio is the one going against the group. Personally, I find this to be an interesting discussion which many people would have different takes on. Even stuff like Leorio saying Kurapika's selfish. Is it not selfish to demand someone change their ideals for your own benefit? Ideals strongly tied to their personal history? Regardless of whether we agree with the character's decisions, the most important thing from the show's perspective is we understand why the characters support their individual claims. When looking at the evidence presented in the show, we can see how Leorio ended up in the minority, even if we may not agree with it. The show can't convince everybody, especially when it comes to difficult subject matters. All it can do is reinforce why that's the position the characters are taking. But you know, if the show were to then make a joke completely at the expense of one of the characters' perspectives, that'd really suck, wouldn't it? Anyway, after a few hours of waiting, Gon wonders whether Mojanti is already dead. Leorio wants to check his body and Lorette will allow him if he's willing to bet on it. He agrees, and so the fourth round is finally underway. The rules are as follows. Leorio and Lorette will settle their match through a betting game in which they will bet time rather than chips. Each of them is given 50 hours at the start and can only bet multiples of 10. They will take turns deciding what to bet on and keep playing until one of them has 0 hours left. If Leorio wins, her sentence will be increased by 50 years. If he loses, 50 hours of their time will be lost. Leorio agrees to the conditions, so the game is on. Lorette chooses first, so he gets to pick the option he wants and how many hours to bet. Lorette decides to bet on whether he's dead or alive, so Leorio bets 10 hours he's alive. It's a poor bet and Lorette knows it. The 10-hour bet fails to show conviction. There's a lack of willingness to risk losing in order to win the game. He can't win betting this way. The second problem is it leaves him wide open to retaliation. Based on the first bet, the second one is becoming clear and Killua has figured it out. The prisoners want him to remain unconscious so he can just lie there and waste the remaining hours. Leorio will have no choice but to bet on if he's still unconscious, and Lorette will get to pick the option she wants and the hours to bet. Keep in mind, it's a bet where she knows the answer, so with 40 hours still up her sleeve, she has plenty of leverage to use against him to gain a massive advantage. It's at this point we hear Mojanti's perspective and what the prisoners did becomes clear. Lorette gave him a note telling him to remain unconscious for the remaining hours. Lorette then bets 20 hours he's really unconscious. Leorio's plan to find out the truth is simple: attempt to throw him off the edge. If he wakes up, then Gon's team gets the point. If he doesn't, then they will forfeit Kurapika's match and the prisoners will have 2 wins. As he drags him over to the ledge, Lorette changes her bet to 40 hours, implying she knew the truth the entire time. Leorio's about to throw him off, but Mojanti wakes up and immediately quits the match, giving Gon's team a 2-1 lead. The issue though is Leorio's down 80 to 20 as the leverage of hours allowed Lorette to hit back hard. So with 10 being such a poor bet, what number was the best one to go with? Well, 50 would have won the game instantly. The downside is Kurapika's match wouldn't have been resolved. You just kick the can down the road and force Killua to deal with it. The second concern with 50 is one of the main deterrents is actually gone. Gon has the keenest instincts of the group and he thought Mojanti was dead. So with your best judge of the situation going against you, it would be hard to risk 50. And 40's not great either. 40 leaves your opponent in complete control. If you only have 10 hours left, it's basically over. You're completely at Lorette's mercy as your leverage has been lost. 30's probably the best choice. It maintains conviction in his betting and still gives him the ability to recover if he's wrong. Had he bet 30 and things still played out the way they did, Lorette could only respond with a max of 20 rather than 40, leaving Leorio still up 60-40 even after the unconscious bet. Leorio though is feeling quite confident. Since he's pre-med, he knew Mojanti was only unconscious and they're up 2-1, so he feels in control. But therein lies the problem. Leorio's confidence and attitude comes about when he feels he has the upper hand. Using his knowledge, he knew the answer. Unfortunately, Leorio behaves quite differently when he loses hold of the situation and uncertainty is attached. With the third match finally resolved, it's time for Lorette to reveal her appearance and problems immediately ensue. Leorio thinks she's cute and honestly needs to calm down a bit. She decides the next bet will be whether she is a woman. This throws Leorio off his game, convinced the answer is obvious. He asks Lorette how she will prove if he gets the answer wrong. She proposes he can examine every part of her body until satisfied. Kurapika and Killua know where this is going, and so do you. He bets 10 hours Lorette is a man, hoping he's actually wrong. Which he is, so he gets his kicks, but is now down 90-10, deliberately putting himself into the position of zero leverage we talked about earlier. This is a joke. I know. You're welcome. But unlike the previous one, it's destructive to both the event taking place and Leorio's character. Leorio is potentially giving up the game as well as 50 hours of time. In fact, from his perspective, it should be viewed as throwing the entire exam. He doesn't back Killua's skills at all, believing he must win, otherwise they have no chance of passing the test. He should really see this moment as one where he needs to win at all costs. But he intentionally hurts their chances of success, and unfortunately the damage doesn't stop there, as Leorio's motivation for being here also takes a hit. Maybe needing the money to stop a person from dying when they have a serious illness isn't important when compared to getting your kicks from a random hot girl. He mentioned feeling powerless, unable to change his friend's fate, but I guess it wasn't too bad if he's willing to ignore it completely when an opportunity like this presents itself. Also, the debate about whether Kurapika should kill Mojanti is now gone up in smoke. Leorio wanted him to kill a completely defenseless person so everybody else could pass the exam. Yet he couldn't resist the temptation of feeling up a girl when the team's chances of completing the third phase hinged on his success. Talk about selfish. The joke saps the life out of the seriousness of the moment. It damages Leorio's character, his motivation, the tension, the importance of the task he wishes to complete, and his credibility. Regardless of if it's considered funny or not, it badly hurts the story, making it a rubbish joke and a joke the show's better off without. Leorio getting his personal satisfaction is followed up with the joke of him being a teenager, and it lands much more successfully, avoiding damage to both character and motivation since it's not intrinsic to either of them. But it's finally time for Leorio to get his head back into the game. It's his turn to pick the bet, and after some consideration, the wager he picks is rock, paper, scissors. Lorette agrees and places 80 hours on her victory. This shocks Leorio as she only needs to bet 10 to win. So he can't believe she bet 80 without hesitation, and it's written all over his face, giving Lorette no trouble reading how this has affected him. Kurapika lays out why picking rock, paper, scissors isn't a good choice for Leorio. In the game, you only have a 1 in 3 chance of losing, but if you can read your opponent, then victory becomes much more likely. This is Leorio's biggest problem in all of Season 1, but especially the Majority Rules Tower. He has no ability to interpret what his opponents are doing. Every move they make, he struggles to understand the intentions behind it. From the very beginning of Trick Tower, he failed to do this. Tompen picked up on it instantly. Every single step of the way, he's been trying to delay and frustrate him, and he's fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. His behavior is far too emotional. Honestly, it's kinda painful to watch as he easily gets led around by Tompen. And Lorette has no trouble seeing the same thing, as he doesn't try to hide it, making it a twofold issue. There's the side where he slows down his team at every possible opportunity. But the other thing about this is, in a best of 5 challenge where everybody has to compete, it became so clear who was going to lose and who was going to win. Tompan's trying to throw the game, so that's cut and dry. And Leorio can't think for more than 5 seconds. He has the temper of a child. Of course he was going to lose. I know Leorio will improve, but man, he is painful to watch in the first season, as Gon, Kurapika and Killua have to drag him through the exam. All the while, he behaves like an arrogant, spoiled man-child, way too confident in his abilities for reasons I sure can't figure out. You'd think his inability to save his friend would leave him in a state where he laments his lack of power, whilst being unable to prevent their death. Although, moments like these are meant to be funny, so it totally doesn't matter. Apparently when it comes to humor, you can have your cake and eat it too. Lorette bet 80 hours to throw off Leorio's game. The main thing for him to focus on is remaining calm and taking the gift that's on offer. 80 or 10 doesn't make any difference to him if he loses. You just happen to get more for winning than you would have originally expected. And that's the way he needs to approach this situation. Lorette disrupts Leorio's rhythm again by claiming she can read minds. He calls her out on it, but without any sort of confidence. She knows she's got him and Kurapika sees it as well, calling Leorio's move before he makes it. Knowing Lorette has closed him down, he will avoid doing anything involving opening up. So paper is off the table. The result is Leorio uses rock and Lorette deliberately does the same, forcing a draw. Leorio's sigh of relief is short-lived when she reveals to him she did it to waste time, since part of their goal is to run down the clock, not just win the games, though this time she vows to finish him off. Kurapika reads Leorio's hand again, having lost confidence he will crave reassurance and use rock once more, meaning Lorette will go paper. Gon tries to help by telling Leorio to go scissors, but something like this won't work. For him to win, Leorio must figure it out for himself and gain the confidence required to be successful. The final rock, paper, scissors plays out and Leorio is defeated, leaving the score tied at 2 apiece and Gon's team losing 50 hours. Tompan gives it to Leorio as he walks back despondent. He's about to complain, but even he recognizes he's in no position to mount a case against him. Now, Leorio went into this challenge needing to resolve Kurapika, so was he at a disadvantage? Well, solving the challenge was neither a positive or a negative. It was only the subject to the betting. Who was in the lead by the end of it was dependent on the character's ability to analyze the situation and interpret what the type of bets would be and how many hours to use. We talked about an example earlier where he could have ended Kurapika's challenge with the lead of 60-40. Lorette was able to beat Leorio even after she gave him a second chance. She could have won on the first hand but had so much control she knew she wouldn't lose, and was even able to justify why she didn't win on the first attempt. Wasting the contestant's time was a strong enough reason to continue throwing off Leorio's game. She toys with him yet manages to get the result, and it's important that if there's a situation like this, the character who is doing the toying still ends up winning. Otherwise it hurts the validity of the contest, the credibility of the one doing the toying, and the accomplishment of the person who turned the situation around. There's a great example of how not to do this in a certain magical index. In it, this guy Azad is winning against the main character Toma, but decides out of the blue to not immediately kill him but to toy with him instead. In the end, Toma turns things around and ends up victorious. It makes Azad look like an idiot and Toma's victory loses impact as it appears the events are rigged to end up in his favour. Azad throws the match pure and simple. It's much better to handle these moments the way Hunter x Hunter does. If a character has gained such a strong position of power to the extent they have time to mock their opponent, it's better to have them win, otherwise it embarrasses the stakes of the show. So it's finally the deciding match and Killua's time in the spotlight. His opponent hasn't done anything all tournament except sit quietly at the back. Simply hearing him speak frightens the other prisoners who are terrified of him. On Gon's side of the arena, Leorio insults Killua's abilities, and although it pisses him off, he does admit that if it's a math challenge he's resigning, maintaining the very casual behaviour seen from him throughout many stages of the exam. The warden admits he didn't really want to use this guy, but it's the Hunter exam so mercy isn't on offer. His cuffs are removed and everyone backs away. Mojanti then calls him out for being all show, which I imagine he regrets doing. As he walks towards the arena, Leorio informs the others he knows this guy from his reputation and recommends Killua forfeit. Killua's opponent is Jonas the Dissector, known for killing 146 people with his bare hands. There was no rhyme or reason, no correlation between the victims, he just enjoyed killing them. An unfazed Killua walks towards the arena, not discouraged at all by what he's heard, and simply asks what the contest will be.
勘違いするな。これから行われるのは一方的な惨殺さ。試験も御社も俺には興味がない。お前はただ泣き叫んでいればいい。
Again, Killua casually acknowledges the conditions of the challenge, catching Jonas off guard, and the power behind Killua's calmness is finally revealed.
様がこの手でバラバラに。
So Gon's team wins 3-2, but before they go and wait out the 50 hours, Killua offers Beldot a shot at him, which he refuses. Guess he must have been tired or something. A door opens and Gon's team goes to wait out the time Leorio lost. There's not a whole lot to talk about at first when it comes to them waiting out the hours. Killua tells Kurapika how he killed Jonas, who takes relief in him being on their side. Then Gon and Killua explore the room whilst we see other contestants complete this phase of the exam. Things pick up when Leorio mentions the time remaining, prompting Tonpin to mock him about his performance during the challenge and the selfishness he displayed. Leorio engages in the argument, a terrible choice on his part since once again Tonpin holds all the cards. Even though Tonpin lost, he didn't waste any of the time and threw his challenge deliberately. At the end of the day, he actually achieved his goal when resigning. Leorio needs to disengage from the argument. It's another moment where he has no leverage and can't possibly win. Tonpin leaves the discussion satisfied with his efforts to further demoralize Leorio. With the time finally up, the team is free to leave and continue the challenge. They spend some time running around chasing their tail, attempting to find a way to progress. Eventually, they make it to a door and need to vote on whether to open it. The result comes back 4-1 and Leorio loses it with Tonpin for constantly throwing the challenge. Turns out he pressed the correct button. It was Gon who messed up. It seems like they're about to move on, but Tonpin demands an apology for being blamed for something he didn't do. Leorio isn't about to give him one, so they're going to fight. Once again, Leorio's quick temper has gotten him into trouble. He can have a go at Tonpin as much as he wants, Tonpin's certainly no saint. But he jumped the gun. Tonpin pressed the right button. His accusation was wrong. Noticeably, neither Kurapika nor Killua reacted at all. They're able to understand that even if Tonpin had done it, engaging with him would be a waste of time. And now Leorio has gone a step further and is going to fight him, running down the clock even more and continuing to limit their chances of success. He is an extremely slow learner. Also, he literally just mentioned how they must hurry, like right then in the same moment, and Tonpin told him his true objective. Tonpin spelt out for him what he's trying to do. He wants them to fail. Gon and Kurapika both try to stop them, though Killua comes up with the best method of dealing with the situation even though he wasn't trying to. He simply moves on, keeping the group heading forward. He goes into the next room and calls Gon inside, distracting everyone from what they're about to do. There's another question about whether they're ready for the final test. This time Tonpin does vote against the group, bothering Leorio once again. But Kurapika's not having it. Tonpin played his hand well with the last two questions. The payoff is made better than it should have been by Leorio's incompetence and Gon's mistake. However, he still made good choices. He went along with the group, so when Gon messed up, he was able to protect himself by being in the right. Then he played on Leorio's frustration by deliberately getting the next one wrong. They enter a room filled to the brim with weaponry and two massive doors in front of them, one with an X, the other with an O. The warden fills them in on the details. One path allows all 5 of them to pass but takes 45 hours to complete. The other is short but only 3 people can enter. If the short path is selected, 2 people must remain chained to the wall until the time runs out. Therefore, those 2 will fail the exam. So the team deliberates their choice, with Leorio making his position clear. He's going for it no matter what. Tonpin calls him out on his shamelessness. If it wasn't for him losing 50 hours, they'd have enough time to complete the course via the long path. Gon actually wants to take his chances with this one. Since they've gotten this far together, he wants them all to pass. Killua calls him out for being naive. He's determined to make sure he and Gon are 2 of the people who complete the 3rd phase. It's Tonpin though who makes the first move when he tries to attack Leorio. One of his wild swings misses, hitting the wall instead. In this moment, Gon with his keen eyes sees the solution to their problem. We then cut to where the other contestants are, and Gon, Killua, Kurapika, followed by Leorio and Tonpin arrive, completing the third phase. The way they managed to pass was Gon saw the weapons could break the wall, so the group voted for the long path and broke the wall in between the two, allowing them to sneak into the short one. Gon's ability to calmly evaluate their situation and find a solution to their problem was the key to their success. With that, 24 people managed to pass the third phase of the Hunter exam, including Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Leorio, and Tonpin, meaning the challenge is over and it's time to wrap up. There's plenty to like about Hunter x Hunter, even in the moments where the quality dips. Moments where an audience will take pause to think about how they would handle the situation if they found themselves in similar circumstances. Gon and Killua performed extremely well in their challenges, and Kurapika did okay, with his main highlight being when we saw the extent of his motivation to get revenge against the Phantom Troop. How unstable he can become when faced with someone able to trigger memories of them. However, Trick Tower has problems. Majority rules as a concept for a challenge can be executed well. Here though, it ran into issues. Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Leorio were all together in a challenge with a max of 5 people. Even before the beginning of the first phase of the exam, 3 of them started to build camaraderie with each other, with the 4th joining them in phase 1. The 4 of them started to build chemistry together, but that doesn't mean it's over. It only means more work is required to break them apart than would be if they were complete strangers. The issue is the show's solution was to bank on Leorio being utterly incompetent. Most of the time, his inability to think and his poor behavior is what's used to ensure the challenge was close. That there were more problems than there realistically should have been. Leorio as a character was smashed from pillar to post, as his selfishness and inability to maintain his composure caused the group constant headaches and setbacks. In a show like Hunter x Hunter that relies on its characters being skilled and talented, having someone this incompetent be successful in the Hunter exam isn't a win for the show. It's also a lazy way of solving the problem. Anyone can make a character dumb as a stump. It doesn't require talent and is a really cheap way of handling things. So how could it have been done if you're set with 5 people where 4 of them know each other already? Adding in more people doesn't necessarily make things easier because you'd end up handcuffing Tonpin. If one of the extra contestants is taking the exam before, he wouldn't want them to fail, so he'd have to change tactics. So let's stick with 5. The best way is to increase the difficulty of both the questions and challenges. The short and long path is a good example of the type of switches you would need to pull in order to push the team harder. Another benefit of having 5 competent characters is there's much more mystery surrounding who is going to lose if the contestants were faced with something like 5 one-on-one tests. The Phantom Troop is actually a great example of this. The setup may be different, but all 12 are extremely strong. And during the arc at the auction house, 2 of them end up dying and 1 of them loses their Nen. If you were to ask people at the start of the arc who those 3 members will be, it would be much more difficult to predict when compared to who was going to lose their challenge during Trick Tower. And the main reason for this is that each member of the troupe is shown to be impressive, whether it's through their power, talent, or intelligence, making it much harder to guess the correct outcome. There are ways of having this concept work effectively without relying on one of the characters' stupidity to create tension, which I would make the case doesn't work anyway. But going back to wrapping up the episodes, there were still some issues with the setup to the best of 5, and some of the prisoners' challenges were poorly thought out. All of these elements hampered the overall quality of Trick Tower, leaving it in a position of inconsistency. Now it's time to quickly talk about me. If you enjoyed this video, please check out my Index series. Since I'm new to this and still getting the hang of it, they're the only videos at the moment I would consider to be any good. I'm constantly trying to improve my work and will continue that trend when I return to the Index series. So hopefully you'll check it out. Until then, thanks for watching.